Well, now we're halfway through that. Good morning. Well, we're here with half the team, and the other half we're expecting to barrel in at any minute now.
And he is shaped like a barrel.
I hope you didn't hear that. It's the 13th of I was going to say November.
Friday the 13th of October.
Give them the time as well, then.
I was born on Friday the 13th, so therefore I think it's always a very lucky day.
Absolutely. 13th is always lucky in my view.
Yeah.
Of course, one of the things that I write about from time to time are the Templars, and that's how the 13th got its name.
Yes.
We are here to give you a little bit of history as well as everything else. Well, good morning, Richard. And
good morning. You've spoken already, have you, about the Knights Templar?
I do from time to time, and in fact, I wrote an article for the now transferred to somewhere else Town and County magazine. That, in my view, looking at the evidence, that the Templars actually fought for Henry III in the Battle of Lewes.
I think that may be right, and as you're probably aware, the Temple, which is an area of London that is exclusively occupied by members of the bar, so there are lots of chambers there, and I used to be in chambers there. It is an area that was given over to the Knights Templars.
Yes.
And the church there is a fascinating place. It's quite sparse inside, but it has a number of monuments and that sort of thing to Knights Templar. And you know that if you ever see one of these things where you've got the lying down stone image and they have their legs crossed, you know what that means?
No.
It means that they went on a crusade.
Yeah. Right.
And so there are several of them there. There are several at Winchester Cathedral, I know, and at various other places. But that's why the Temple in London is called the Temple, is because of the Knights Templar.
And you know that they're excavating what they think is a Templar chapel just halfway down School Hill.
Yes, I've heard of that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm fascinated by the Templars, as indeed so many other people are. Right, now he's late this morning.
He is late.
I'm going to actually...
we started early in order for him to be there, but he's clearly still brushing his teeth or some other aspect of his body.
Right. I'm just checking to make sure he's not saying I haven't got the link.
Do you want to give him a call, Keith?
We'll give him a chance, shall we? To redeem himself.
We can have a suitable chat in the meantime.
Yes. We have the company behind us. A wonderful, I'm going to say little dog, medium-sized dog, Jed, who goes everywhere that Richard does, and who is an absolutely delightful little animal. Now, tell us about Jed.
Jed is a border collie. So I walk around and I look a bit like John Noakes, for those of you who remember that from Blue Peter. And he's 9 years old. And previously, when my daughters were younger, we had a little Cairn Terrier who was, frankly, a bugger, Keith. And I took him for 10 weeks up to the Malling Community Centre I may have told you this.
No, you haven't.
Because my wife insisted that I took him for obedience classes. And I went up there every week for 10 weeks. And he was just all over the place. And the worst thing was that the dog next to us within the class was this Labrador. And they went around saying, what behavioural problems do you have with your dogs? And I was there for about half an hour saying this, and this. And the couple next door to me with this Labrador said, when we send him out for the takeaway, sometimes he gets it wrong. Or equivalent. But to be fair to him, little Max, we got into the stage where he was able to do everything. But the last test that you have to do is you sit them down at the far end of the community centre, walk away, and he has to sit there for a minute still. And he didn't do that. He ran over and picked up Doris, the Norfolk Terrier, and ran across the Malling field with her in his mouth.
Oh dear.
And he was the one dog who failed. And so when Max finally went after 15 years, I said to my then almost adult daughters, I said, look, I'm going to get a border collie. I had border collies when I was younger. I'm going to get myself a border collie. And it's a very different thing, as you can imagine, Keith, because as you know, I can just leave him off the lead. I can leave him outside a shop off the lead. I was very lucky because I got him through a website, and it was a family with very young children who decided they wanted a dog, but a collie takes a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, you share that with my daughter. She has a collie, and who's now coming towards the end of his life, I'm sorry to say. But she had one before that as well. So.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. So he's 9. So he's not.
No, he's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he's okay at the moment. But I was incredibly lucky because I thought, well, I'll go and pick that. I don't really mind as long as it's a border collie. But you will confirm this, Keith, I'm sure. He's a very handsome dog.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he wows the people in the pub when he comes in. Those particular regulars. Yeah.
Yeah. Aren't
you? You're a handsome fellow. You are indeed.
They do say that dogs take after their owners.
Well, there you go. There's exceptions to every rule.
Yeah. But when I brought him back to Lewes, which is now, in fact, over 9 years ago, I got him when he was about 3 months old. I'd gone on the train to Southampton to pick him up from the family who had him. And he really hadn't been socialized properly because they simply didn't have time. And they had this awful big chain that they used as a lead, which, just made him very fearful. And I went with my 2 eldest daughters. And when we got back to Lewes, I had to carry him home because he was so scared. Are you sure I've not told you this?
You've told me a little bit of this, but not all of it, no.
And he was a very nervous dog. But I'd noticed in the house where I'd gone to get him from, they had a conservatory and they had flies there, and he was snapping away at the flies, actually jumping up in a way that he normally doesn't do. But so I thought, how do I deal with that? I want to get him out of the house type thing. and I bought some bubbles. And he loves bubbles, and he will jump and bite them. Now, the only downside of this, Keith, is that every morning I'd go out of my back gate with my bubbles out onto the street, blowing them, and he'd just be in the back garden looking at me, thinking, I want to come out, I want to come out, I want to come out. And my wife had phone calls from people saying, is Richard all right? I've seen him in a suit on his own, blowing bubbles in the middle of the street. But eventually I got him out of the, because we've got a back gate on one road and we've got a front door on the other. And I was able to get him out of both of those. And then off the lead, I took him around from one to the other, and you could almost see the brain clicking in his head. Right, so that's geography, isn't it? And he's very good at, so for example, when we go to the same place in Scotland every year, me and him, and get to the station, and he simply walks me, he knows where we're going. He remembers places very well. So yeah, he's been a joy to me, I have to say.
Oh, yeah, I can see why. A delightful dog. I mean, he really is. He's, as you say, he's quite quiet, but he's very personable. And
yeah, he's sometimes.
I mean, he winks at the girls in the back.
Oh yeah. Sometimes at 3 a.m, he's not quiet. We used to have a cat that ruled the roost near where I lived, and sadly he departed, and so inevitably the cats, it's a bit like Gaza and Israel. The other cats invade, and he goes mad. He really does go mad.
I'm going to send Philip the link again, just in case he didn't get it.
Yeah, sure. You sure you don't want me to give him a call?
You could, yes. It would help a two-front attack, as it were.
Because, Philip is very keen to be a TV star.
Well, I mean, the two of you get very, I mean, our ratings are huge, of course, but the two of you get very good ratings in comparison.
I'm not retiring to do anything else, but I think Philip does enjoy it.
Oh, the thing hasn't stayed, so we'll go back to you and I. Oh, there we go.
Have you got the link through? Right. Okay. I'm sitting next to Keith, and he will no doubt.
I've just sent it again.
Resend it. Okay. Yeah, and I've got to say, Phil, your signal at the moment is awful. Okay, shall I just fly solo today?
Just a pause while we get the technicals right. You know what we're like with technicals on this station.
But if you've got a time constraint, I'll happily do something different, and then we can talk about what we thought about talking about next time. He's just gone. I don't understand.
Okay. Well, I mean, he's got the link. He can join us at any time if he wishes.
Yeah.
I wonder if I could just ask you this big uproar about sending in warships and so on and so forth. What's your view of the reaction to the Hamas thing? I know that everybody's talking about it, but I think that it is quite important. And here he is. Here he is. As if by magic, we've got him there. Good morning, Philip.
Good morning, both.
You're
How are we today?
Very fierce there. I hope you're okay.
And a little bit quiet.
Am I quiet?
Yes.
Wait a minute. I might just be able to do something about that. Okay, now try.
Is that better?
Well done, Keith.
Oh.
You've sorted it out.
Indeed.
Keith was just asking me about events in the Middle East, and I don't want to go into them in too much detail, but I have to say I'm somewhat ambivalent about the various stances that people have taken. It does seem to me that there has over the years been fault on both sides. And
yes, well, go ahead, Richard.
Well, and I was listening to the radio this morning, as you do, and there were contributors there who were talking on both sides in very inflammatory language about what's happened and what's not going to happen. And it's a position where they seem to be so entrenched that it's very difficult to see how there could be a sensible compromise at the moment. I regret to say. I fear that there's going to be more tragedies there in the next few days. And I don't think there's anything the rest of us can do about that. I don't think us sending boats there helps at all.
No, I was surprised to hear that this morning on the news. It's an impossible situation. They don't compromise either side. Neither of them compromise. The Israelis are hard nuts, Netanyahu in particular. And what is going to happen, I'm afraid, is that the Israeli troops will invade Gaza. They'll kill a lot of innocent people, and Hamas will kill the hostages. Yes. So we have this enormous conflagration. I just don't see any compromise whatsoever, because they both see it as almost biblical land rights. And it's not just the Orthodox Jews, it's a combination of orthodoxy, the Bible, and security.
Well, if you were going to plan how the world should be, it seems to me one of the ideas that would have been a really bad idea is having the same city, which is meant to be the basis of three major religions, all very closely linked together. So you have Judaism,
Because
you
they
have
all think,
and Christianity. Yeah.
because they all believe they have a right to be there. Their own scriptures.
It's odd, Philip, because before you joined us, eventually, having had your ablutions or whatever it was you were doing, Keith was saying that
I was waiting for a link.
Okay, is that your euphemism for what you were doing?
Yeah, do carry on, Richard, please.
Keith was saying that he has a very strong interest in the Templars, and of course, that's the sort of, in a way, the Christian part of the problems in Jerusalem were the Crusades.
Yes, there is a film with Orlando Bloom called The Kingdom of Heaven, and it is about the conflict between Saladin and the Crusaders, and in particular the Templars, because the Templars were a rogue outfit.
Yes.
And the King of Jerusalem, and there was one, historically correct, if the Templars got out of line, they would hang them. And the film has a sequence where they are hanging these Templars. But yeah, they were basically crusading extremists, weren't they?
Yes, and I would, I gave a very brief explanation to Keith of why the Temple in London is called the Temple, the area where many barristers have their chambers. And that's because it's land that was donated to the Knights Templar after the Crusades, as I understand it.
That's correct. And the Inner Temple Church, the Temple Church, as you know, has the tombs of various Templars, Knights Templar, at the back, and it was used in, at least certainly in the Da Vinci Code. There's a scene set in the Temple Church where the graves are. Right. Whether it was in the sequel, whatever it was, Demons and Dragons, whatever it was called, I don't know, but there was certainly quite a long sequence set in the Temple Church in the Da Vinci Code.
Yes, and the Temple area, so I'm sure people may know this, but there are 4 Inns of Court, and you have to be a member of one of those to be a member of the bar.
Yes, and 2 of them are based in the Temple, the Inner Temple, which is my inn, and the Middle Temple, which is divided by a little narrow lane called Middle Temple Lane.
Right, exactly. And so you've got one on one, and then north of that, you have Lincoln's Inn, of which I'm
Chancery Lane. Yeah,
on Chancery Lane, and then north of that you have Gray's Inn.
Yes, which is off High Holborn. It's bordered by High Holborn to the south, and then Gray's Inn Road to the right, to the east. And that was where my chambers, latterly my chambers were. And I loved Gray's Inn as a location. I really did, actually.
Because even if you're a member of one particular inn, you don't need to have your chambers in that inn.
No, far from it.
But you did need to do your qualifications through the inn that you were in, and in our time that involved having to go and dine quite a few times.
Yeah.
Just as an aside, I shared your favourite area with you for 10 years because Reuters was on Gray's Inn Road at that time.
Of course it was.
Just from your temple, your inn, yeah.
It may well be, Keith, that like ships in the night, we passed in those days without knowing each other.
Indeed, it's quite possible.
No, Gray's Inn was just a nice place to be. The temple is very stuffy. I mean, Richard knows this. He's from a Chambers. Most of his career he spent in a Chambers on King's Bench Walk, a leading set, and there's a terrible stuffiness about the temple. Certainly the inner temple, anyway.
I may have told you this story, Philip, but in the chambers next door to the one where I was in pupillage and then, as you say, spent quite a lot of time. During the Second World War, the decision to create the man who never was formulated. And this was a body that was put off the coast of Portugal with a briefcase of information, false information, about where an invasion was going to take place.
Yeah, yeah.
And they got a body which was of a sort of street dweller.
Yeah.
And they kept it in the basement of that chambers because they couldn't have anybody know about it. And I've been down there, and it is a very, not just chilled, but chilling place, as you can imagine.
Yes, I can imagine.
They created a whole backstory for this fellow. The member of the bar who was running the enterprise, who was based there, got one of his clerks, female clerks, to write a series of love letters that were put in the bloke's pocket, and tickets to the cinema and the theatre and everything that made it look as if he was a real person. Well, he was a real person, but he was this quite significant officer in the British Army, in order to try to divert the Axis forces away from where, in fact, an invasion was going to take place. Quite a clever little ruse, and there's a film about it. There's a book about it, as you probably know, Keith.
Yes, in fact, I saw the movie too.
Yeah. An odd feature about the temple, though, Phil, it is that it has its own separate rules about a whole range of things. So,
absolutely. It's like a constituency in itself.
Yeah, and so even things like health and safety and all that sort of thing are run there, as opposed to being run by, for example, the City of London or the General London Corporation. It's a little enclave. But I agree with you, it is a bit stuffy.
It's a bit like the Vatican, really. It's an enclave.
I never found a pope there, but you may be right. You may well be right.
You didn't look hard enough.
I probably did. Well, I probably. Sorry, go ahead.
Mentioning rather creepy things, you mentioned about the radio. As you know, I do Radio 3. And this morning on breakfast, it was a feature about a composer philosopher. I think his name was Goldberg. I may be wrong. But this chap was absolutely hyper superstitious about the number 13. Because today, of course, is Friday the 13th.
We've already discussed that. Yeah, exactly.
And this chap was so paranoid that any permutation, the total of which would be 13, or involve those numbers, that total, he would go through an astrologer So, for example, on his 39th birthday, he was absolutely bricking it because he was convinced he was going to die when he was 39.
It's 3/13.
Correct. There's no flies on you this morning, Richard, is there? Anyway, he went to an astrologer who said, actually, it is going to be a bad year for you and all of us, but you will live. And of course, the Second World War broke out.
Sorry, go ahead.
The next number he feared was when he was 76. Because 6 + 7, Richard, is what number?
I can't remember. Is it trombones?
Anyway, he went back to the astrologer who said, I think you will survive being 76, but you haven't got much longer. And your death will involve the number 13. And he died the following year in 1951 on Friday the 13th.
Well, you see, my experience, as I've told Keith, is quite the opposite, because in fact, I was born on Friday the 13th.
Well, that explains a huge amount.
Does it not?
I've always sensed that negative energy about you, Richard, and that actually finally explains it.
Of course, in Australia, the unlucky number is considered to be 87.
Yes, well, 87 in cricketing terms, which is what I thought we were going to be talking about, but there we are. 87 is their deathly number, just like Nelson is for English cricketers, test cricketers, one eye, one arm, one whatever, 111. And the permutations of these are superstitiously held by English and Australian cricketers very seriously, and umpires. We all remember David Shepherd hopping around.
And he'd stand on one leg whilst the score was 1-1-1.
Yeah,
or
he would.
That or 2-2-2.
Yeah,
but as I understand it, the reason the Australians have 87 as their unlucky number is because they're on the other side of the world. It's the sort of upside down of 13, if you see what I mean. It's 100 less 13.
Oh yes, yes.
I believe that's the reason for it.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it says
Hasn't occurred to me, but yeah.
It says a lot about the convicts that we sent abroad there, that they would even begin to believe that. But
oh, absolutely.
There we go.
Yes, one can understand the Irish believing that, but English convicts, don't know. I mean, like today, the tripping today, here it's very strong rain and wind. It's a Friday, but it's the 13th, and I have to go just on the cusp of rush hour. Go wrong. Hey, what can go wrong?
well,
and it's a major contribution.
I think you're fine, Philip, and this is certainly what I've found post-COVID. And I don't know in what way you're commuting. You know, I don't drive at all. So if I have to go anywhere, I either go by bus or I go by train.
Yes.
Fridays nowadays, go to Lewes railway station. There's simply nobody there. You can have a carriage to yourself. Just nobody goes to work. They may work, but they don't go to work on a Friday anymore.
Well, that sounds very civilized. It wasn't like that before lockdown, was it?
No, not at all.
Au contraire. But no, I am driving. My contribution to the marital war effort this morning is I'm driving my wife quite some distance to have her hair cut.
Right.
And then
Could
I
you
have to hang around because I am Parker these days. I'm the only one who drives this car we've got.
For Lady Penelope.
For Lady Penelope. I'm thinking of having a hat made actually with Parker on it, but there we go. But the roads round here, particularly on a Friday, particularly in bad weather, are just rubbish. They're just horrible.
Well,
there we are.
Arundel has a tricky road system, to say the least, and every attempt to resolve that seems to be pushed back.
Yeah, the proposed. I mean, put it this way: I've lived in Arundel since 1987, and this so-called bypass has been on the agenda since then and before. And it just keeps getting delayed because it splits opinion right down the middle.
Yeah.
And the upshot is it just means you speed along through ruined countryside on a noisy concrete strip of road until you hit the traffic jam, which is Chichester, which has a bypass.
Lewes is bad enough, but there is at least the 27.
Yes, they've improved. I mean, I remember driving to Lewes when there was no Portslade or tunnel. It was the A27 literally through the centre of Portslade, and it was an absolute flipping nightmare. That route, that journey. But no, so it's not a journey I'm relishing because I have to then hang around twiddling my thumbs in the car because Angmering is a one-horse town at best, while Mrs. M is tidied up. So it's quite a day.
The advantage of you, Philip, is that, of course, you have so little hair.
Yes.
Yours doesn't need cutting.
No. But at least I don't look like a bog brush upside down like you do.
That's a good point, well made, as ever. And you're able to say that because you are no longer, as you know, a member of my chambers. So
mercifully not.
So I can't take any disciplinary action against you.
No, you can't because I'm merely an associate. Yeah.
Well, I can remove you as that. That's within my gift, as you know.
Well, that's fine. You know.
Or I can just insist that you start paying some sort of monthly stipend to keep the role, which I know you being a tight old fella wouldn't pay.
Philip, if you abandon the law, you've got a career in broadcasting, I assure you.
There you go, Phil.
Yes, well, thank you, Keith. You're a hugely reassuring presence, unlike that person next to you. The irony, Richard, in all seriousness about what you've just said, is that is exactly what your senior clerk wanted me to do.
Well,
he actually raised that as a serious probability until I spoke to you about it.
Yeah,
so, you know.
No. Yeah, what happens, Keith, is that for the old codgers who lose their marbles, we sort of treat them, it's a bit like a care home, frankly. And we let them be associate members so that they think they're still members. But
I don't think I'm still a member, and to say there's anything caring about the current format of Chambers is totally wrong. It is a brutal commercial enterprise with no capacity for empathy whatsoever.
Philip, I couldn't disagree with you more. I would ask you to take that back, please. I see and hear a lot more than you do about things that are done for people in chambers who have difficulties. As you may recall, last year we sadly lost 2 members of chambers, and our senior clerk was very compassionate towards their families when those things happened.
You've taken me too seriously, Richard. It was pretty tongue in cheek, so I'll withdraw any substance or truth to my suggestion.
Yeah, no. Keith, you'll know this. If you're in business, you've got a big stick, but also you've got a bit of compassion there behind it, and you mustn't show too much of the compassion to everybody because they'll all take advantage of you. You show them the stick. But then when people are in trouble, you do, in fact,
show that they're part of a caring group.
Yeah. More caring than I'd ever be. I've got to say, I'm more of a psychopath, but there we go.
Now, it is Mirador is a group of freelance people brought together under an umbrella that has fun, is informative, etc., etc. I'm not going to go into all that, but do I understand that a chambers is a bit the same? That you're an organisation but made up of a bunch of freelance people?
Absolutely. It is herding cats, always with members of chambers. Philip, who's been head of 2 sets of chambers, and I are both fully aware of how tricky it is to get people to do what you want them to do. But you could cajole them, you can persuade them, but you can't ultimately tell them what to do because everybody is self-employed. And it suits a lot of members of the bar who frankly would be hopeless at being within a corporate environment. I don't think I'd be particularly good at it at all. I know that Phil wouldn't.
Well, Phil wasn't. Yeah. Phil tried it and was a disaster.
And so we're all our own individuals. And that brings its own challenges, but has its advantages. So you can say, thank you very much, but I'm not working tomorrow. And within reason, nobody can tell you that you are working tomorrow. I'd say this, though, Keith. Different sets of chambers, because obviously there are lots and lots of sets of chambers, have a sort of different ethos about that. And there are some sets where the clerks will say, and they'll do it politely because they're clerks, they'll say, no, sir, you're off to Wolverhampton tomorrow. And I've heard that from senior members of other sets of chambers where they've said, well, I don't want to go to Wolverhampton. And the clerk has said, no, off you go, you're going. Whereas I don't, an advantage of our set is that we don't do that. We have a broad church, if I can put it that way. And we're able to accommodate people who have either personal health issues or requirements to be off because childcare or caring for older people, like I'm caring for you, Keith. I don't know who cares for Phil. Nobody cares about Phil.
That's the first accurate thing you've said today.
I'm very grateful, Phil. Thank you. I'll note that down. But it's Phil is right to this extent, that it can be a slightly cutthroat profession, even within a set of chambers, because people are battling for the same briefs. Sometimes I've never really felt the need for that. I don't think Phil ever did. But there are some.
No, I never did. And I don't think crime in Westgate, of which you are the acme, they're not battling for the same brief, are they? There's plenty of work.
There's too much work, Phil.
Yes, exactly. So there's no need to battle. There's work there if the criminal team, so-called, wants it. And
yes.
there are different ways, generally, of a clerk putting a level of pressure on. Yes, there's sorry, sir, you are going to Wolverhampton. I don't care how senior you are going to Wolverhampton. Or there's the middle ground, which is, well, Mr. Meredith, you can take the day off if you want, but this is a very loyal solicitor. He or she won't take too kindly should they find out that you've turned down this brief for a jolly. So there are different ways, or as I understand it very commonly now, if you don't do this for us, Mr. Barton, nobody can cover it.
That last one is currently a major problem at the bar.
Yes.
But it's true. It's not them simply saying, "Oh, you have to do this." There are just too few barristers. There are too few courts. I don't know if you know, Philip, but for example, Hove Crown Court, which has 4 Crown Courts, as of April of next year, is closing down for at least 4 months for renovation work.
I have no idea about that at all. No, I didn't know that.
But you can imagine that's going to have
because when Lewis, I remember when Lewis was closed. I practiced through that time, and everything was moved to Hove during Judge Gower was the resident during his time.
Yes,
and it was chaos, absolute chaos.
Well, I may have told you already earlier this week. I don't know. I was due on Monday just gone to start 5 weeks prosecuting a case. Which
you don't like me saying where, do you? No.
It was originally 15 defendants. 8 of them have pleaded. I've got 7 left that I'm prosecuting. And you know, Philip, as well as I do, the amount of work that goes into preparing a case like that. You know, opening note, sorting out the order of your witnesses, sorting out what's called agreed facts, sorting out the bundle the jury gets. There's a whole range of things that need to be done. I did all of those. And then late on Thursday, I got a message through from that particular court saying, sorry, we can't accommodate you because none of your defendants are on remand. In other words, they're all on bail. The only witnesses you have are police officers, fully bound witnesses. And on Monday, rather than starting the trial, I did a hearing when it was relisted for next September. It's just
September 2024.
Yep. And this is a case, one of those many cases that I do, Philip, you know, of fraudsters taking money off older and more vulnerable people. And I've already got 3 death certificates. in relation to 3 of the victims. And I would have thought by September of next year, I'll have even more. And I just think
I fear you will. Now, Keith,
Yeah.
just watch him. He mind your wallet. You're an elderly, vulnerable person.
Yeah.
He's next to you, so
Yeah.
mind your wallet. He's a bit like that.
he's got nothing in his wallet. I've checked it already.
I can't remember what the name is for people who collect moths.
Yes. Lepidopterus.
Nice one. Nice one.
Lepidopterus.
That's
Uh,
butterflies.
Sounds
isn't it?
something like that. Yes.
I'm not sure if it's moths as well. I would imagine it might be.
Let me ask you one question though, because I think that people really appreciate these sort of chats, because both media and law are mysterious. We're behind sort of veils, and they really don't know what goes on. One of the things that distresses me about media, particularly in this country, is that the cream does not necessarily rise to the top. It's a system that actually puts in place some people who really shouldn't be there, and some people who will be mediocre all their lives, but that the top brass tell us how good they are, that people start to believe it. Is it the same in law?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Well, you're sitting next to a prime example. I mean, Richard is a legend in his own mind. But well, look, because I've had enough of being rebuked and insulted, I have to go and take my wife now. So I shall sign off and hopefully see you on Monday.
We shall look forward to that.
Very much.
Hopefully, I'm going to have a chat to Richard a little later. We're going to rejig things a little, which won't make that much difference to you, except that I'd quite like you to start this early, if it's agreeable to you.
Well, 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock for me is absolutely ideal.
Right. And the other thing is, I'd like the two of you, I might as well say it publicly, you both have come up with good ideas for interviewing people. And this forum isn't a good one to interview. So I'm going to ask you, if it's not too much of an imposition, whether you would agree to do an interview show on Wednesday morning, in which I would stay on the sidelines and you would interview whoever you wanted. And you could actually... I mean, you know, the first alarm bells are, oh my God, how can we fit it into our day? But you wouldn't necessarily have to do it live. We could do that recorded. But you've come up with such good ideas. I'd like you to consider it.
Right, two things. One I will discuss further with you. The interviewing thing, I've gone down that route with I would like.
Oh, he's gone.
He's gone.
Oh dear.
He's gone for his haircut.
We lost him. Anyway, he can tell us in private.
Yeah, he can tell us in
But
private.
the only reason I brought it up there is trying to get the two of you together, except on these occasions, is very difficult.
Yes, he can.
Yes. Now, what time do you have to leave? Are you okay for a moment?
I'm okay for a bit. Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, let's continue our chat. Let's make sure that Jed is okay.
No, he's fine.
Oh, yeah.
He's there.
Yes.
He's
Oh,
there.
you heard your name, didn't you? Yes. You did indeed. You did, yes. And he's like us all. He likes a bit of fuss on a Friday morning. Yeah.
Yeah. And if Keith's scooter loses its electric power, Jed can act as a husky and drag him back home.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Mush.
That's that. Yeah.
Mush, mush.
That would be very, very useful indeed. Yes.
One of the things that I might, perhaps you wouldn't mind us chatting about is the difference in Canadian court procedure and here. I had a very good friend, God bless him, he's now gone to the great court in the sky, you would thoroughly have approved of him. He is larger than life, but he's a Scot. He was born on the Isle of Mull.
Oh gosh.
He was excellent in court, but he was a barrister and solicitor.
Yes.
They do both, and in some instances he was appointed judge on a temporary basis. So there's a much wider application. Do you think that can ever apply in this country?
Well, it semi does, if I can put it that way. I know in Canada that people can be an advocate, barrister, as you say, and solicitor, whereas in this country, typically there is a solicitor who prepares the litigation, prepares some of the documentation. One of the things that you'd have to do if you were a solicitor in this country doing crime is you would need to go on the rota for going to the police station. And so, the solicitors get called at 2 a.m. because it's their turn on the rota to go up to Hollingbury and talk to somebody they've never met before and then have them interviewed. I don't do that, and I never would. So here we have a very clear split profession. Canada doesn't. Things have changed mildly in this country in the last maybe 10 or 15 years. It's always been the case in family law that solicitors can do their own advocacy. They rarely do, if truth be told. And then solicitors were increasingly permitted to train and qualify as Crown Court advocates. And there was a burst of them. The local Crown Prosecution Service decided this is the way. We're paying these people anyway, their salaries. So why don't we simply use them as our advocates? And I think at one stage there were 14 solicitor advocates prosecuting for the Crown Prosecution Service. Now, there's no disrespect to them, but it's a completely different set of skills. And some of them didn't like it and left, and others got moved back. And I think at the moment there are probably only 2 in Sussex for the Crown Prosecution Service.
Right.
And there are some solicitors who still use, will still have solicitor advocates. But it's not that many. 10 years ago, we, the bar, were worried that we were going to just get taken over because, as you will appreciate, Keith, there are very many more solicitors in this country than there are barristers.
Yeah.
Huge numbers. It's a sort of, I don't know, it's sort of 10 or 15 times the number. So if they all came in and their firms were thinking, well, we can keep not only the what's called the litigation fee, in other words, the preparation fee, but also the brief fee, that is for what's done in court, we get double bubble. We get both lots. And there were quite a lot of battles at that time because, of course, a difficulty with the position. Sorry, this is very dull, I know.
No, I mean, I think a lot of people are interested because we simply do not understand.
Yeah. So there is this difficulty about being a member of the bar, is that you don't, save in very limited circumstances, you don't have direct access to a client. It has to go through the solicitor. And so solicitors can say, something he did say, well, we could get you an independent barrister if you want one. Or you can use this fella, who's our in-house advocate, who's very good indeed. Can't guarantee who the barrister would be. This one's very good. And thereby encourage them to accept the solicitor advocate. And I certainly had cases. I recall in particular one, which was an attempt murder, where a judge here said to a solicitor advocate, I was prosecuting a case, I think it was a 3-defendant case, and he said, advocate, stand up. Do you really feel competent to do this case? What experience have you ever had of doing anything on this scale? And of course the bloke had no answer. He was doing it because of the money. The firm wanted the money. I'm glad to say that that's sort of died a death a bit. And so there's much more work, albeit that period of time was one of the factors, not the only factor, but one of the factors that means that there are fewer very junior barristers coming through to the criminal bar. You know, we are an aging breed at the moment, and it would be an awful shame if we were not able to keep an independent bar where it's fearless and frank advice that you're able to give with, dare I say it, not sure I have it, but with some skills in advocacy, and in particular, for example, in cross-examining or taking somebody through their evidence or advising them. There's a whole range of things that you learn that could well be lost.
Yeah. What's the answer?
What's the answer? Well, at Westgate, we are actively encouraging people to do crime and recruiting for people who want to do crime. And that, that may turn around. I've been at the bar long enough to see. So, for example, there was a time when family law didn't have the work it does at the moment. And so we, the criminal team, were sort of not exactly carrying them, but we're doing more work. Family work now, because local authorities are so twitchy about being accused of not looking after children, that they bring proceedings in a lot more cases than they ever did against parents. So there's just a vast amount of work there. But that will die down. It goes in waves. But also the other thing, Keith, is frankly, is if you're just starting out, it's enormously expensive nowadays to do your degree and then your bar course. And then you do get paid something during your pupillage. That's your training in chambers. But getting a pupillage is difficult. So many of the people who are coming as pupils now are sort of late 20s because they've been working in other ways to make money. But, these are people who have debts of £50,000. And, when I was training, I simply wouldn't have been able to do that. And I don't quite know how we get around that problem. But yeah, it's
sad to see some of the, particularly with modern economics making things so expensive, to see these things struggling.
yes, completely. Yeah, it's and it's very hurtful when it's a profession that, for many of us, we have a great passion for and believe in, that it is being sort of eaten away at. And
Can I just tell you a story just to lighten the mood a little?
well, try me.
My friend Charlie McLean, as I said, sometimes acted as a barrister, and he would give the RCMP a very bad time.
Yes, of course.
But of course, it's on a professional basis.
Yeah.
But Charlie took possession of a little motorboat in Vancouver, and he lived in North Vancouver across a rather large bay. So he set off home with his boat, and it ran out of petrol. And there he was in the middle. And so he waved his paddle and so on in a time-honored way. And the RCMP rescue boat came out and saw who it was, sailed him, said, "Hi, Charlie," and left him.
That's very good. Yes. My old head of chambers when I was in London, his wife bought him a number plate for his car, which was in fact A11 KBW, but he had it split, so it was A1, one King's Bench Walk. So he's A1 of the chambers, split number plate. And he was down in Kent defending a case and got his client off. And as he was driving home, he got pulled over by the police. And they said, "Sorry, sir, that is an illegal number plate. You cannot have it like that." And it was quite clear that they were just sore about him getting the acquittal. And they thought that they would make him pay back for his the audacity of the man, that he would go off and get a defendant acquitted, I suppose. Keith, I'm going to have to take a little rock and roll over the road.
Well, thank you for spending the time.
Not at all.
It's lovely to have this sort of extended chat first thing in the morning. And this starting at 8 o'clock gives us an opportunity to be a little more extended. And as I say, people are finding you and Philip entertaining. I mean, actually, people do, whenever they talk about it, they say, with them slagging each other off. But everybody accepts the fact that they learn a lot from you, because that edifice there really has a lot of secrets. And the people pass it and they go past it. Most people don't know whether it's a crown court and a size or whatever. So this is informative, but very amusing too, because all sorts of anecdotes come out. And now we've got an addition, the good dog Jed. Yes, we have.
I'm going to leave with you for now.
Absolutely. And if anything comes up, I shall ask you his opinion.
Yeah, exactly. Let him sit up and he'll give you his views. All right, I'm away.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, and we'll see you eventually when you've finished.
Yeah, it won't be long.
No, all right, no hurry, indeed. We'll just pull around. We will take a 3 or 4, well, a 10-minute break now. The time is 9:10 on the 13th of October, 2023. And believe it or not, it is now 20 degrees centigrade. We will take a break and then we will go through the front pages. Okay. But my mouth dries out for one thing, so I need to refresh it. And we need to sort of take a fresh view. So let's get fresh. Here we go. And yeah, I always object to people saying that. Yeah, but it's the only word I could think of right then and there. All right, here we go.